It was a cold Christmas night in the quiet, snow-covered town of Silverpine, Colorado, a picturesque community nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. The town, with its postcard-perfect streets and tightly knit neighborhoods, had never seen much crime beyond the occasional petty theft. But that would all change on the night of December 25th, 1998. The Hartman family, Lucas, a wealthy tech entrepreneur, Claire, a former pageant queen turned homemaker, their 9-year-old son Noah, and 6-year-old daughter Emily, had just returned home from a holiday party. Their home, a grand Victorian-style mansion at the edge of the neighborhood, was aglow with Christmas lights, casting a festive hue over the fresh blanket of snow that covered the ground. Emily Rose Hartman, their youngest, had just celebrated Christmas with an exuberance that only children possess. She had opened presents, played with new toys, and been doted on by friends and family alike. Her blonde curls bounced as she pranced through the house in her new Christmas pajamas, showing off her gifts. Emily was no ordinary little girl, though. She was a local beauty queen, having participated in pageants from a very young age. Her smile, bright and infectious, was a hallmark of her performances, and she had already collected a shelf full of trophies, crowns, and sashes. Claire, Emily's mother, had been the driving force behind Emily's pageant success, training her with the same discipline and perfectionism that had guided her own career in the spotlight years ago. The Hartman family, on the surface, seemed to live a life of privilege and joy. Lucas had built a small tech empire, and their wealth allowed them luxuries that most could only dream of. Their children attended private schools, and they were active in the social fabric of Silverpine, hosting charity events and attending the most exclusive galas. However, beneath this facade, there were whispers. Some of the other parents at school found Claire too controlling, too intense about Emily's pageant career. Some thought Lucas was distant, more consumed with his business than his family. But to the outside world, they were a picture-perfect family living the dream. That night, after the holiday festivities, Lucas and Claire tucked Emily into bed, kissing her goodnight as they had done every night since she was born. She smiled sleepily, her eyes fluttering closed as she hugged her stuffed reindeer tightly. As the family retreated to their respective rooms, the house fell into a peaceful silence. But the peace didn't last. Claire awoke around 5:30 a.m. on the morning of December 26. She had intended to go downstairs for coffee when something caught her eye on the staircase. A handwritten letter. It was 3 pages long, written in scrawled, shaky handwriting, demanding a ransom of $150,000 for the safe return of Emily. The note warned not to contact the police, or else Emily's life would be in danger. The note was signed by a group calling itself the Deliverance Squad, an unfamiliar and bizarre name that sent chills down Claire's spine. Panic consumed her as she rushed to Emily's bedroom. Her daughter's bed was empty. Emily was gone. Claire screamed for Lucas, who quickly joined her, horrified by the discovery. Claire called the Silverpine Police Department immediately, despite the ransom note's warning. "My daughter's been kidnapped," she told the 911 operator, her voice frantic and barely coherent. Within minutes, officers arrived at the Hartman mansion. The usually peaceful home had become a hub of chaos, with police officers, neighbors, and friends all swarming the property. Claire and Lucas were beside themselves, struggling to comprehend the nightmare that was unfolding. Little did they know, things were about to get worse. Later that day, after hours of searching the house and surrounding areas, Lucas decided to check the basement, an area of the house that had gone unnoticed during the initial search. As he walked down the creaky stairs, the cold air of the basement wrapped around him, sending a shiver down his spine. There, in a dark corner, he found Emily's body. She had been strangled with a garrote made from one of Claire's art supplies, a thick cord twisted tightly around her delicate neck. Her head showed signs of blunt force trauma, and there were indications of a possible sexual assault. Emily, the once vibrant beauty queen, lay lifeless in the basement of her own home. The realization hit Lucas like a freight train. His daughter wasn't kidnapped. She had been murdered, and worse yet, her killer had likely been in their home all along. The discovery of Emily Rose's body shook the small town of Silverpine to its core. A child murdered in her own home during Christmas. The horror of it was beyond comprehension. News of the tragedy quickly spread across the nation, and the Hartman family was thrust into the center of a media firestorm. Reporters from every major network camped outside their house, eager for any new development in what was quickly becoming the most notorious murder case in recent memory. But as the investigation unfolded, the case took unexpected and disturbing turns. The Silverpine police, inexperienced in handling such a high-profile murder, struggled to maintain control of the investigation. Critical errors were made in the early hours. The crime scene had not been properly secured, allowing friends, neighbors, and even family members to traipse through the house, inadvertently contaminating potential evidence. The basement where Emily's body was found had not been searched until hours after police had arrived, further complicating the investigation. Amidst these procedural blunders, suspicions began to swirl, and they landed squarely on the Hartmans themselves. The ransom note, bizarre in its length and content, immediately raised eyebrows. Why would a professional kidnapper leave such a lengthy, rambling letter behind? Why demand $150,000, a figure that was notably close to the amount of Lucas Hartman's recent business bonus? The Silverpine police, already under immense pressure to solve the case, began to theorize that the note was part of a cover-up. It didn't take long for whispers to spread that perhaps the Hartmans weren't just grieving parents, but suspects in their own daughter's murder. The media, ever eager for a sensational story, latched onto this narrative. Speculation about Lucas and Claire's involvement in Emily's death ran wild. They became fixtures on tabloid covers and news broadcasts. Their faces splashed across the screen next to headlines like "Beauty Queen Parents Murdered Their Daughter," and "Is the Hartman Family Hiding a Dark Secret?" Public opinion quickly turned against them, despite the lack of concrete evidence linking them to the crime. Meanwhile, the police investigation was faltering. The forensic evidence was a jumbled mess. Fibers from Claire's clothing were found on the duct tape used to cover Emily's mouth, and the garrote had been made from items found within the Hartman home. But the evidence didn't tell a clear story. There were no signs of forced entry, no foreign fingerprints, and no definitive link to an outsider. Adding to the confusion, DNA evidence found on Emily's clothing didn't match anyone in the Hartman family, but it also didn't match any known individuals in criminal databases. As the investigation dragged on, the case became more complex. The Hartmans' behavior was scrutinized relentlessly. The media pointed to Claire's somewhat obsessive involvement in Emily's pageant career, framing her as a pageant mom who had pushed her daughter too far. Rumors swirled that perhaps Emily's murder had been the result of an accidental outburst from Claire, who had snapped under the pressure of perfectionism. Others speculated that Lucas, often described as emotionally distant, had been involved in something darker, an affair, or perhaps even some form of abuse that had gone too far. The police, desperate to find answers, began to focus almost exclusively on the family, especially Claire. She had been the one to find the ransom note, after all, and she had been the most involved in Emily's day-to-day life. They theorized that the ransom note could have been a ploy to deflect attention from a tragic accident that occurred in the heat of a moment, a cover-up for something that had gone horribly wrong. But there was no smoking gun, no definitive proof, just suspicion. In the midst of the investigation, Noah Hartman, Emily's older brother, became a topic of interest as well. While initially overlooked, investigators began to consider the possibility that Noah, just 9 years old at the time, might have played some role in his sister's death. Had the two siblings been playing and an accident had occurred? Had Emily provoked Noah, causing him to lash out in a moment of anger? Some investigators considered that perhaps, if such a thing had happened, Claire and Lucas had covered up the incident to protect their son from the devastating consequences. Despite the swirling suspicions and conflicting theories, no arrests were made. As weeks turned into months and then years, the investigation remained in limbo. The Hartman family was torn apart by grief and suspicion. They maintained their innocence, but the weight of the public's belief in their guilt was almost unbearable. Lucas retreated into his work, avoiding the press and declining interviews, while Claire became more reclusive, only emerging occasionally to plead with the public for help in finding Emily's real killer. The media circus around the case never died down. True crime shows dissected every element of the story, offering armchair detectives endless material to debate and theorize over. Was it an inside job? Had the Hartmans orchestrated the perfect cover-up? Or was there an intruder, someone who had slipped into the house unnoticed, committed the unspeakable crime, and left behind no trace? By the time the early 2000s rolled around, the case of Emily Rose Hartman had become something of a cultural phenomenon. People were obsessed with the case, from amateur sleuths on internet forums to professional investigators who took a particular interest in the bizarre and confounding details. The media had long since stopped portraying the Hartmans as mere suspects. Instead, they had become the centerpiece of an enduring mystery that haunted Silverpine, Colorado, and beyond. In 2005, a self-proclaimed suspect came forward. Jacob Liddell, a 41-year-old drifter with a history of disturbing behavior, confessed to Emily's murder while living in a homeless shelter in a nearby state. He was quickly arrested and extradited to Colorado. The media frenzy reignited as people hoped for closure to the now infamous case.